Greetings to you this Advent season. My name is Doug Michael, and I am the incumbent of St. George's Cathedral and the Dean of our Diocese of Ontario. And it's my privilege to share with you today this short reflection on love for our fourth week of Advent. Now, it may seem like an odd place to start, but thinking about this week's theme brought back to me a memory of one of the most scary drives home that I've ever had to make. Those of you who know me might be tempted to think it was one of those crazy nights back in my medical student years in South Africa during the last days of apartheid, when medical staff often needed police escorts after late-night shifts in Soweto to navigate safely between the various warring political and tribal factions which were battling for power there. I'm pretty sure I could still recognize the sound of an AK-47 if I heard one, but I have not been channeling my Bruce Willis Die Hard Christmas, and so that's not actually the drive I'm talking about. Or you might be tempted to think it was my first ever drive through a real Canadian snowstorm after we moved to Collingwood, the heart of Ontario's snowbelt, driving through a whiteout so bad I literally could not see beyond the end of my car. White knuckle stuff. But that's not it either. The most scared that I have ever been driving my car home was the day I had to drive my beautiful and precious 3-day-old daughter back from the hospital where she had been born. I have never been more acutely aware of just how many ways there are to get into an accident than the day I first had to take responsibility for the life and welfare, the nurturing and thriving of this completely dependent and vulnerable human being. That was the start of a whole other kind of relationship than I had ever known before. Love, but different from the kind of love that my wife and I shared with each other, different from the kind of love I shared with the rest of my family, different from the kind of love I shared with the friends who were close to me. Because this child could be nothing other than completely dependent on me, at least for a while, until she grew enough to be able to share in different, more give and take kinds of relationships. Those were the memories that came flooding back to me as I thought about Christmas this year, thinking about what it meant that God came to us, an utterly dependent infant, born in a stable, destined as a toddler to become a refugee, and ultimately to be executed by the colonial powers which had invaded his homeland. In every way, Jesus' life was one of vulnerability. And it didn't have to be that way. In the relationship between us and our Creator, it's really we who are dependent on God for our very existence, not the other way around. There are many ways God could have come to us in might and glory and power. But the way God chose to come was as an infant. And that speaks to me of something quite profound. It speaks to me of the openness of God's heart and of God's invitation to a very specific and intimate kind of relationship, sharing in all the fullness of the given and given again flow of God's own Spirit. Because Christmas, at its heart, is the invitation to love as God loves us, the love whose only concern is for others, as we would love a helpless, vulnerable child. The invitation of Christmas is to bring others into that life of God with us, to love our neighbor in the same way, to recognize Christ the vulnerable, Christ the refugee, Christ the persecuted in the lives of those who share this world with us, and to care. That's the blessing I wish for this Christmas. To celebrate in our hearts and souls what it means that the God whose children we are comes to us as a child in turn, so that we may love one another as God has loved us, and so that the peace and joy of God's kingdom may come on earth as in heaven. A blessed Advent and Christmas to all of you.